Right, you ready for this?
I'm ready for this. Are you ready for this?
I am, because this is going to be a big one.
Is it?
Yes, we
Why?
are discussing the contentious issue of drinking while sailing
Yes.
and sailing and drinking and sailors and drink.
It's all about drink.
It is.
It's all about drink and whether sailors, i.e. cruisers in particular, drink too much. What do you think? Hello, I'm Liz.
And I'm Jamie.
Welcome to Follow the Boat, in which we discuss what it's really like to give it all up to live on a boat.
And go travelling around the world. We've been doing it since 2006 and we're still at it.
Each week we talk about our latest YouTube videos.
And about boats, sailing, travel or anything else which floats into our heads.
And if you leave a comment we like, we'll give you an answer and a name check. Peace and fair winds.
Elizabeth, why are we discussing drinking and sailing this week? What are your reasons for coming up with this particular subject?
Was it me or was it you?
I think it was both of us, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, I suppose because you gave up drinking, it's been a topic of conversation, hasn't it?
It's not just a topic of conversation between us two, but among other sailors and actually non-sailing friends as well. The whole thing of quitting drinking.
Yeah.
It's an unusual thing to do among sailors though, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think we should say right from the off that we're not preaching. We're not saying that anyone else at all should do this.
No, I'm going to talk about the reasons why I quit.
Yeah.
And that's the only thing I'm going to sort of preach about is my
Your
rationale.
feeling.
Yes.
Okay, and I might chip in with a few of my feelings. And I would like to point out also that I'm still drinking.
Yep, almost every night.
I'll have a scotch most days and a beer every now and again.
Yeah, fair enough.
Go on then. So why, I suppose, the question is, did you stop drinking?
Why did I stop drinking?
Yeah.
A few reasons. I have to say though, it was not unplanned. And I think that's the first thing that, the first reaction I got from people was one of shock and surprise.
Yes.
But I'd actually been thinking about it for a couple of years. I had in my head, you know how you set sort of 5-year goals in your life? Do you ever do that?
No.
No?
I
You
don't. No.
I do.
I just bumble along.
No, occasionally I have sort of long-term goals, and I just had in my head this idea that when I hit 50,
Yeah.
I want to be as healthy as possible, and ideally without being on any kind of medication.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, I still have some rather nasty habits.
Yeah. How shall I start listing them?
Yeah, go on then, listen.
No. Not to be
No.
unkind.
I eat too much chocolate, I still vape because I'm an ex-smoker.
I did give that up.
Well
Just
done.
want to chip in now and again.
Yes.
I gave up the smoking and the vaping, which I'm very proud of.
And coffee. Too much coffee, way too much coffee. But I just thought, drinking, I'm doing too much of it. And this was especially, it came to the fore in lockdown.
Do you think if it hadn't been for lockdown, by the way, that you would have given up?
I'm not sure about that.
Because I reckon that was a huge catalyst.
It was. I think it was a catalyst for many, many people out there.
Yeah.
Either to quit drinking or to...
Embrace it.
Yeah.
Big time.
I think for most... Actually, I remember one person said, and I quote him verbatim, "What the f*** are you doing quitting drinking at a time like this? This is the time when you want to be hitting the drink."
Yeah, I know. And unfortunately, a lot of people did around the world, didn't they? There were lots of problems with drinking, and you included.
Yeah, myself included, definitely. I just got into a habit, basically, and it was just a habit of, you know, drinking every night at 5 o'clock.
Yeah. Well, I would say actually that habit had always been there when we're in marinas.
Yes, but perhaps not every single day and exactly at 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
And I think maybe when we got to marinas, we'd go to the bar, maybe make the most of happy hour.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, slip in a few beers at happy hour, and then by 7 o'clock, that's it, call it quits.
Yeah.
The problem was that during this lockdown, I was, well, slipping more than a few beers down my gullet.
Well, yeah, because the marina was closed, there's only about 7 or 8 boats there. We were all close together. There was no bar, So we provided our own booze, and obviously being yachties, we all had a bit of booze already on our boats before it even started. In fact, we had loads because we'd been to what's the island?
Oh, Labuan.
Labuan, and we'd stocked up on loads of booze.
Labuan is a duty-free island.
Yeah.
It's one of 3 duty-free islands in Malaysia. And yes, just before we got to Kota Kinabalu,
Yep.
we went via Labuan, and yeah, we stocked up.
We had loads, we had bloody loads of spirits and wine. God, we had some really good stuff. It's all gone now, most of it, because we were going to the Philippines. That's why we'd really stocked up. So it's quite good actually.
Yeah. So yes, it had become a habit.
Yep.
And I just, I don't know, I just decided, as I say, it was a long-term plan, but I think I just got to the point where I thought, well, okay, if you are going to do it, then now is the time to do it, because the drinking is now starting to get a little bit out of hand.
Yes, I'd say a lot out of hand.
I mean, you say that.
Yeah.
You were calling me alcohol dependent,
Yeah.
which I don't quite agree with, because alcohol dependent, I wasn't even sure what it meant. I looked up.
I don't think it's a real term.
It is.
Oh, is it?
Yes, it means you're an alcoholic.
Yeah. Well, I think that there was not a day when you didn't drink.
Yes, although I always felt like I had control over it.
That's what they say, though, isn't it?
It is what they say, yes. And I always knew that I could give up at any time, which is, I think I proved that point.
You have proved that.
But
it was the sheer quantity that was
Yeah.
upset. The two things that you've already said, that the 5 o'clock alarm bell, got to have a drink right now. Whoever's around, I will go and sit with them and have a drink. And the vast quantities. Those were the 2 alarm bells for me.
And the other thing as well, because it's just pissy Asian lager, it's rated at 5%, but I don't think it is 5%, because when I drink 5% beer back at home, or when
Yeah.
I used to, I'd get shit-faced pretty quickly. But I think in the tropics, little tinnies, I could sink 8 of those, no problem, sometimes double figures. And this isn't just at the weekend, this was every night.
Yeah, so every night on the pontoons, one of the boats would host the bar party that night. We all had our little chairs, didn't we? We'd sit around and make little bars, and everyone would come over to whoever's boat it was whoever's turn it was that night, and it was great fun. It was brilliant.
It was nice. I mean, being yachties, we're all quite creative, and we basically made the most of this situation, in which, for most people around the world, of course, you were locked down either into your home or your immediate surroundings. For us in the marina, we were literally only allowed on the pontoons.
Yeah.
So we made the most of it.
And to be honest, it was good fun at the beginning. It was all a bit of an adventure. Nobody knew what was going to happen. None of us had any idea it was going to last as long as it did.
True.
It was all quite exciting to be in the marina with everything closed, and all the birds and the fish coming back, and the wildlife, and sitting down with your mates of an evening and talking through the gossip of what's going on in Sabah. And there's always a bit of gossip, and there were nice guards and unfriendly guards, and yeah, it was great fun. I have to say, I really enjoyed it to begin with. But for me, it got
You say
boring.
begin with, yes. It got boring.
It got boring for me because after 2 or 3 months of that, conversations started to go round in circles. I think people started to dip. People started to get anxious about the future, what was going on. We started to feel trapped and worried because we didn't know what we could do with the boat, whether we could leave. We've done all that. So we were going through all of that. We were going through the same old thing over and over every night and getting drunk. And I don't drink a lot, although I'll quite happily sit and talk with 1 or maybe 2 drinks. I just take my 1 big glass out with me, and then when I finish, that's it. If I stayed any longer, it would just spiraled downwards into constant saying the same thing and shouting.
That's just drunken conversation though, isn't it? And I think the thing is, when you're not drinking, and obviously this is something I realise now, but at the time had no idea of, but you used to remind me of it regularly, was, repeated conversations and even, having discussions, let's say, lively arguments. You'd end up arguing against yourself if you left it long enough.
Definitely.
You know what drunken conversations like. It's silly, and I think it was because it was happening every single night and not just at the weekends, and it just became the normal thing to do. And I think for me, even I just got bored of it. And that's not a reflection on the people we were with. I think
Those lovely people.
I was just bored of it myself more than anything. I could hear all the bullshit, and half of it was coming out of my own mouth.
Yep.
And I sort of just woke up to that and decided, you know what? This is just a waste of time, a waste of energy, a waste of money, and ultimately, I'm not doing myself any favours health-wise.
Money, bloody hell, the amount of money we spent on booze and the amount of space all that booze took up on Esper. For me,
Yes.
those were two brilliant, that affected me, that was two brilliant things.
Yes, the stowage of beer on a boat is difficult.
Slabs.
Yeah, slabs of beer, 24 tinnies in a slab. And of course, when we'd go off and do longer passages, I would stock up on, well, it'd always be at least 12 crates of the stuff.
Yep.
You'd end up sleeping on it.
I mean, there was beer everywhere. You tried to put it in the fridge and it wouldn't let you. You could put 6 cans in, otherwise there's no room for the bloody food.
Yes.
And it was a sort of, that was another telltale sign of alcohol dependency or alcoholism in the absolute panic attacks if there was no beer. The other thing, that I haven't talked about recently, but wherever we went, we'd have to go ashore and find somewhere to drink beer.
Definitely, and I think that was another habit that we got into was after dropping the hook. Well, the first habit, of course, was having a beer after dropping the hook, no matter what time of day. That was just a little tradition that I picked up off another cruise I used to go sailing with, and so I carried that tradition on. But the other thing, as you say, was the next thing was to go ashore and find the bar on the beach that sold cold beer.
Yep, and you and a few others I know very well could nose out the place that sold the beer immediately. It was the number one thing. Get ashore, find where we can get the beer. And so that dictated always where we ate. And pretty much in the very remote places and the very Islamic places, if there was a Chinese restaurant, it meant Chinese.
Yeah.
And Chinese food is not my favourite. So I'd sit and eat Chinese because that was so you could sit and have your beer.
I like Chinese. I also like the Chinese beer as well. They knew how to serve it cold. But you're right. That was another habit that was happening, was this obsession with having to eke out the local boozer.
Quite interesting.
And again, I think I woke up to that as well. You come to a pretty anchorage and, have you got to race ashore and find the boozer? Well, don't get me wrong. I used to enjoy a nice cold beer and watch the sunset. Sundowners, as we call them.
We have, over the years, spent a lot of time looking for beer, enjoying beer and loving all the talking, and still love all the talking. But it's become less, the days and the things we do are less structured around alcohol. Because we've removed that, although I still drink, I don't need it like you did. Because we've removed that, it's completely restructured our lives and what we do when we're sailing.
I'm a bit of a loss now.
Yeah.
No, one advantage for me was the financial aspect.
Yeah, for you.
The amount of money I was spending on booze. I used an app called Try Dry. I'm not here to convince you to stop drinking, but if you are interested in quitting the booze, I can recommend this app because you put in your average amount of money you would spend on booze a week or a month, and it would calculate for you as you ticked off each day of not drinking. And after the first month, I realised I was saving, it was going into 3 figures easily.
Yeah.
And after a few months, I realised, God, did I really spend this much on booze?
Yeah.
And I did.
It was an eye-opener.
It was. And so the advantage, or one way I justified it at least, was it meant I could then spend more on my photography gear, but perhaps more importantly, to actually spend more time on photography. So rather than at 5 o'clock racing ashore and, getting drunk, I'd actually go ashore at sunset with the camera and spend some time doing photography instead. And that for me was perhaps the biggest advantage of it all.
It was such a relief to see you doing that because you used to do a lot of that, particularly when we were in India. A lot of street photography, going out and talking to people, and you're really right back into that now. It's great. I really love to see you doing that. I just want to say about what you did in giving up. I think that it was a good thing for you to do, and I think it could be a good thing for some people watching, and that is people who, like you, addictive personalities, I'm not a psychoanalyst, but people who either do something thoroughly or not at all. I can dip in and out. And then we've had a few people who commented saying, yeah, I can have one here, one there, it's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But you couldn't do that. And I think that's the important thing, is recognising that in yourself. Can I have one beer a week? Can I have one just for special occasions? But you felt you couldn't do that.
I realise I have an addictive personality, and it's something I've always been like. And take my photography, for example. Once I start buying second-hand lenses or film cameras,
We've suddenly got 12.
exactly, and it does apply to everything that I do in my life. And unfortunately, that extended to drinking.
Yeah.
I am not able to have one or two. I cannot moderate.
Yeah.
And I'm old enough and stupid enough now to know this. I know this in myself, that I cannot moderate. And so it is a case of all or nothing. So I thought, well, I'll try the nothing route and just see how it goes. And I have to say, it's been over 2 years now, I think. And I don't miss it at all.
Yeah.
I really don't.
I'm glad you don't drink, personally. It made my life a lot easier.
But I think we should at least address this idea that drinking and cruising do go hand in hand, don't
Do you
they?
know, loads of people in the comments said they do. And we asked the question, didn't we? So what was the poll?
The
There
poll
were 2 polls.
was, do you think it's okay to drink and sail?
Yeah, is it okay to drink alcohol while sailing?
Yeah.
And then we had yes, no and unsure. And the results were 27% of people thought it was okay. 63 said no.
How many?
63%.
So 2/3
Yeah,
of the respondents.
yeah.
Of how many? 300 odd respondents?
340, something
Yeah,
like that.
340 of those people, 2/3 think it's not okay. Now this is just drinking and sailing.
Right, well that was the thing that came out of all the comments. Loads of comments said the same thing. They all pretty much, most people, I don't think anybody said, nah, you can get pissed all day long while you're sailing. Not one person said that.
Thank God.
Not one, which is, that's good. But a lot of people came up with situations where you might drink. I mean, there was the obvious one, like going across the equator, birthdays, and we've done that.
Yeah.
If you find this topic interesting and would like to continue the conversation, come and join the Follow the Boat Discord community. Look for the link in the description. It's free. Is there a difference between being at sea at anchor on a mooring or in a marina? What do you think?
Well, I think when you're in a marina, you can assume that you are pretty much as safe as you're going to get. I mean, obviously, we know it can blow up in marinas still. On moorings and at anchor, it's different, and this is something we've noticed more so in Southeast Asia than in Europe, are the unpredictable situations, the unknowns, the times when things go sideways, as someone commented. Sailing can go sideways when you get those sudden squalls that blow through at
And
3
they're
o'clock
big.
in the morning. Yeah,
40 knots going the wrong way that wasn't predicted.
yeah.
And if you're pissed, if you're still up and drunk, or if you've gone to sleep, fallen asleep and can't wake up, then you've got problems. We've seen it ourselves.
I've been there myself.
Yes.
One situation when we very first started sailing, Liz had gone back to the UK, and so I went off and for the first time decided to do a bit of solo sailing with another friend on another boat. And we got to this Greek island, and I have to admit the anchorage was pretty rotten. It was full of weed.
Always difficult, yeah.
Yes, I didn't set the anchor properly, but I went ashore, had a moussaka and a few probably retzinas, came back, went to sleep, and at 2 in the morning I heard this shouting. And I couldn't work out why this boat had rammed into me, smashing one of our solar panels. And it took me a full 5 minutes to properly rouse myself from my drunken stupor to realise they hadn't rammed me, my anchor had dragged and I'd backed into them. Right. The point being though was that because I was groggy and hazy, it took me a while to realise what was going on.
Not good, is it?
No, it was, and it wasn't until next morning I kind of woke up, obviously a bit shocked by smashing the solar panel, but more so being quite overwhelmed by how I was unable to jump into action straight away.
Yes. And I think that people like Salty Lass, who commented that, yes, sure, obviously you don't sail and drink, but they don't even moor and anchor and drink. They only do alcohol in marinas.
They say, we have a dry boat when at sea, and that includes mooring balls or anchorages. If something goes wrong at night, the last thing we need to be is bluted, I love that word, bluted, and staggering around with sore heads. And that's exactly the situation you don't want to find yourself.
So they have no quarter. You just do not have any drinks on the boat when you're doing anything with it, where you're in charge of it. That it does include anchoring. I mean, in the past, we've got bluted at anchor.
Many
Haven't
times.
we? Yeah.
Many times. And
Don't
as we
get
said,
more.
the habit was to crack open a beer after dropping the hook. I think in the later years, it wasn't like we were getting absolutely blasted at anchor. But certainly when we first started, we were doing that in Turkey.
Oh, God, yes. Yeah.
You hit that racket.
We were awful. I mean, we were on holiday.
Now that's an interesting thing, because I think that comes into it, and I know that our friends Sailing Still Sapphire, they commented and said, when cruising every day is a weekend. And I think that's the trap that's easy to fall into, and we fell into that trap as well, was thinking that you are on a permanent holiday and not realising that this is actually a lifestyle, it's not a holiday.
It's what new cruisers do. You can see it, can't you? You can see them all, way, having a great time, pretend, everything's great, with no idea what's going to hit them around the corner. And we were exactly like that.
Yeah.
Oh, God, I've tried telling people, but they won't hear it.
No, and it's something that we did, I think, for the first 2 years of our cruising in Turkey. We partied every night, we got drunk every night, and we thought we were on a permanent holiday.
We did, until I realised we'd completely blown our budget.
Exactly.
Because, so that was a firm reminder of just taking life a little bit more seriously. Not so bad now, although we still have our moments where it does feel like we're on holiday, but less and less so, don't you think?
I was just thinking back to that time we met the Swedish couple who had just started out cruising. He was a keen game fisherman, so you spent the evening, we were invited on board their boat, and you spent the evening talking to him about how to make your own lures.
Oh, he was
for fishing.
fascinating, he was brilliant, he'd won awards and he was used to sponsor, all this. Anyway, won't bore you with all that.
Yes, fishing. And meanwhile, I sat with the wife, and she took me to one side and she said, Jamie, is it just me, or do cruisers drink more than the average person, or words to that effect? She was genuinely...
Is it normal to drink like this every night?
Yeah. She was concerned. You could tell she was concerned and a little bit surprised. And I think I turned around to her and I probably just said, yes, we are like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know if you looked, but I tried to find some empirical evidence that actually supports the anecdotal evidence that so many of us have that cruisers are boozers. I think we are, from what we've seen, but of course that's not borne out by actual proper evidence.
Yeah, there's lots of anecdotes.
Yeah.
Many of you came back with your own anecdotes.
Thank you. I'm sure we all had a good old laugh reading some of those.
Yeah, but I don't think anyone's done the studies on boozers. Cruisers. I'm calling them boozers. Boozing cruisers per se. But I think we can all agree. Tell me if you disagree. Send us a message if you disagree. But I think we can agree that yes, cruisers on the whole like a drink.
I think so.
Probably drink more than the average person.
Yeah. Purely anecdotally, I would agree with that, and so would our people that commented. I mean, there were some funny stories, but there were also some very sobering stories, and there were examples of people losing their lives, particularly on dinghies.
Yeah, so I can't remember the dinghy one, but Rosie wants to go sailing. That's a user who, one of our viewers who commented on, I think it was Discord actually. She said, I work as a lifeguard in Canada and they show us drowning reports. Half of the fatal casualties that drown involve alcohol to some degree. And okay, that isn't just on boats, but yeah, alcohol definitely is a contributing factor to a lot of these accidents and fatalities.
And she wasn't the only one. There was a few people who said that other people who'd actually seen it, I can't remember his name, works in a marina, and every year people lose their lives through drunkenness and falling in. Imagine if you fall in and you're drunk. You fall off a pontoon in a busy marina, you're drunk, it's late, nobody sees you go in. That's the end of it, isn't it?
And of course, a lot of the time, it's not just marinas that we're getting onto the boat from, but it could be the dinghy. And that is a recipe for disaster. I'm sure we've all been there. I mean, you know, we've had problems getting on and off the dinghy sober.
It's the one thing that I have always worried about. Even when you were drunk, you could get us from A to B. You could always get us back to the dinghy, but I could never get drunk if I knew we were going on the dinghy. I just found it too scary. It's the one thing that, you know, I can actually hold my hand up and did the right thing, but Jesus.
I've just thought of another reason why I quit drinking, which involves dinghies. Do you remember
God.
the rice wine evening was when we were on the rally a couple of years ago, and they put on this event. The organisers put on this event.
It was great.
It was
In Sabah.
such a good evening. But they ran out of beer halfway through the evening. I don't think they had quite calculated how much beer we were going to get through. So they decided to bring out the rice wine instead as a substitute. Well, the problem was that we carried on drinking this rice wine like it was beer.
Yeah, you were drinking out of mugs like this. And it's like arak, it's like pochine, it's like, you know, it's real rocket fuel.
It's like LSD.
Yeah.
It was shocking how toxic that stuff is. But anyway, two of us that evening, not just myself, but two of us, literally within the space of 5 minutes of each other, ended up in the water trying to get back onto the dinghy to get back to our boats. But I sadly had my brand new camera on me, which also went for a little swim.
Stupid.
Stupid.
I mean,
stupid.
I was not
stupid.
impressed. I saw you do it.
Yeah, I wasn't impressed either. That was another reason why I just thought, do you know what? This is ridiculous. You're a 50-year-old man and you're getting so drunk. And this wasn't something that happened frequently. But
No.
that particular night was, I know everyone literally took off like rockets, didn't they?
Yeah. Do you think that's the night that started you thinking, I really got to stop?
Yes, definitely. Definitely. And I think if I was 20, I wouldn't have thought anything of it. But the fact that I think I was thinking, you know, as I say, you're a 50-year-old man. Right, you can't behave like this. This is just stupid.
Yes, it is stupid. That's what I think. But I'm sure people will disagree. They do make very entertaining stories, drunken stories. I've got lots myself, but...
They're boring to other people though, aren't they?
Yeah.
Let's face it, a drunken story. I went out with some people after I'd quit drinking, and the whole evening was just them talking about how they'd got drunk the previous night.
Right.
And I realised, well, A, I wasn't there, so this is meaningless. And B, it's like telling people your dreams.
Oh, God.
No one wants to know about them, do they? They're just boring. So.
Yeah. So, yeah, drunken stories, great, but maybe I don't know. One question that I want to know is, what's too much? What is too much anyway? You know, because you give up because you're drinking too much, but too much is such a subjective thing, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
How do you know when you're drinking too much?
I don't know. You see, the problem is that do you know yourself? I mean, we all know that, you know, alcoholics have to have an intervention because it's other people that see that they're having too much.
Yeah.
You yourself as a drinker don't see it.
Yeah.
I mean, this is what you say of me.
Yeah.
That I couldn't see it because as far as I was concerned, I was in control. I wasn't getting hungover. I didn't feel like I was getting blitzed every night, and so I can't be an alcoholic. So I think that question is difficult to answer, and I think everyone is a little different. I did get one really good comment though from Pranker Squire, who frequently comments, and always love reading his comments. He says, "You know I love you guys." He's obviously had a drink.
But he hasn't.
And I regularly comment, but this issue is different, as so many of my loved ones have destroyed their lives with the demon drink, and this is the line that I love: habits are the enemy. And I think that is the key.
Definitely your enemy.
And I would say anyone who is habitually drinking possibly falls into that.
Yeah. It can bring about all kinds of difficult mental disorders. Including the anxiety, actually, that we talked about last week, in last week's podcast.
Yeah, I think I said briefly in the podcast, didn't I? I realised that the anxiety had come on after I'd quit drinking.
Yeah.
And I bumped into an ex-alcoholic and had a very long chat with him over lunch. And he was explaining how anxiety is actually one of the side effects of quitting drinking.
Right. Right.
Uh,
But your anxiety didn't come on for about, what, a year and a half?
yes, that's right. And I think he was talking more about sort of going cold turkey or perhaps the immediate after effects of quitting
Right.
drinking. Yes, you're right. Mine came on much later.
I did wonder when we realised you had it, well, when I started to think you might have it, whether it was kind of a delayed reaction to you giving up drinking, because I thought, oh, he's given up drinking, that's probably, that's probably not helping. I don't know, but that's years ago. But then I thought, now you're saying it, I'm wondering whether it was a delayed reaction.
Quite possibly because, we were in lockdown during that time when I quit drinking. That was obviously a difficult time for everyone around the world. And perhaps the veil had been lifted only afterwards when we started going sailing again. I suddenly realised that, in the cold light of day, that these situations that I'd previously had to deal with, hungover, maybe a little bit different when you don't have any booze in your body.
Yeah, well, you could really
differently.
see them for what they really are, and all of those realistic understandings of the situation were a little bit too much to handle. We did, by the way, when we do want to say, don't we, thank you to everybody who commented on last week's.
Oh, on last week's podcast about anxiety,
Yeah.
we got so many comments and we really appreciate them. And I
Amazing.
haven't responded to half of them. I mean, I was even getting private emails from people. So if you are one of those people, then thank you. And I apologise that I haven't responded to you personally, but I was just overwhelmed by the amount of comments we got.
It was great to see people sharing their own stories and thanking us for bringing this out, because I thought that nowadays people were talking more about it, but it seems that it's still not being talked about in many, many circles. Probably not amongst, your macho male sailors. So it's probably quite good that we did that, and it certainly chimed with a lot of our viewers, didn't it? And the comments were great. We're not going to read any of them out. We did respond to most of them, but just know that we read every single one of them, and they really touched us. There was one particular one, have you got it, that really touched us?
I thought you were going to read it.
Yeah,
I can find it. If
I
you
have.
like.
It's here. It's John Watson,
Oh yes,
FDB mates. Cheers, John.
this is on our Discord
Yeah,
channel.
yeah. Always lively debates.
Yes, it's really picking up Discord now. It's great. So there's a link in the description of this podcast if you want to join us.
So John said this. Maybe you. Hang on. Where is it? Yes. Maybe you're being told that it's time to look at your options down the road. Change doesn't have to happen fast, but often there are pointers along the way that allow us to start questioning our situation. This could mean a positive coming from the situation.
Yeah, it really struck a chord, John, that comment. More. I mean, all the comments were great, but John's comment, there was something about it that made us sort of sit up and think.
It resonated. It pushed us to start thinking really seriously about where we are, what we're doing, where we've been, where we're going. I mean, really to assess our situation, and it's an ongoing process. Thank you, John. Thanks very much for that. Sorry for interrupting, but while I've got you here, if you like what we do and you want to support us and become a Patreon, or join us on FTB Mates, or even drop a quid in the rum fund, go to followtheboat.com/pub. Of course, come to the pub. Although you don't drink, it's not something that we bring up, is it?
What? I used to bring it up all the time.
Well, so when you started not to drink back in Sabah, we were with one set of people. There's nobody new. We knew all the people, and it was quite obvious immediately that you weren't drinking because you stopped overnight. So it was a topic of conversation for about a minute. But nowadays, when we meet new people, they don't know that you're a teetotaler, and it's not usually brought up. But gradually, people discover it because they'll ask if you want a beer. And I'll usually say, he doesn't drink. Does that annoy you?
I learned pretty quickly as a non-meat eater of 30 years not to bring the subject up, because you end up spending your time justifying why you don't do it, and for me it's just not important.
I think vegetarianism nowadays is so ubiquitous, nobody cares anymore. But the non-drinking thing is, particularly in our circle, is quite a big thing, I think.
Yes, it is. And
people don't like it, do they?
No. Some of the reactions I've got have been quite surprising. A feeling of ostracisation. Is that the right word? Ostracisation? Anyway, you're no longer part of the club.
Yes.
Jamie won't come out this evening. We're going out this evening, but we won't bother inviting Jamie and Liz because they don't drink. Well, I mean, you do.
They forget that I do.
Yeah. And I noticed it was something that SV Cordelia had said.
Yeah, I've got the quote here. There's a downside to not drinking. Sometimes we feel that we're not invited out because we don't drink, which is very sad because we are quite happy to be the sober entertainment.
And I'm glad they said that, because to begin with I thought it was just me. And I realised that actually when I went home and spoke to my two friends, two different people who had quit drinking around about the same time, said exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
This funny reaction you get from people. And some people are really quite defensive.
Really defensive about it. They think that it's an action, you know, it's your action that you're saying, I don't drink, and they need to readjust their own feelings about themselves. It's not. We just that's it. You just don't drink. Don't care if anyone else drinks.
Yeah.
It's just a thing, you know, it's not a big thing.
Only two people, I'll name them because they're good friends and they're good drinking buddies, and they both like a drink themselves. Roy and Brendan both said, good on you, mate.
Yeah.
And those two really stood out for me because they were the only two people, except perhaps my mum, who said, good on you. John Waters left a great comment, who said, almost 4 years ago I quit drinking after making a 20-year career out of it. Sounds very similar to me, John. I am now 16 months into a refit on the first sailboat I've ever owned. From the time I was a child I always wanted to sail the world. Now I am clear-headed and focused more than ever. Although I do spend quite a bit on materials for the build, it is definitely a lot more rewarding. One thing is for certain, it's hard to find sailing friends that don't drink.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. He's right. Another great example of what we were saying earlier, anecdotally, there aren't many people around that don't drink. Lots of them do drink. In fact, I've got a comment here from Aaron Tardy. Did you see this on Facebook?
Go on.
He says, I think the real question is, do drunks end up becoming sailors? Wonder if that's the case. You know, did we all drink to excess before we got on boats? Does it attract? Is there something in big drinkers that is similar to sailors?
Well, I know Brendan came up with a great comment about, you know, why he likes drinking, and it's basically the reward of either a hard day's sail or a hard day's contorting yourself in the engine bay trying to fix boat problems. So he sees it as a kind of, it's a reward.
Well, that's just like the sailors of yore, when they used to get, certainly the British Navy, they'd get their tot every day, 1850 to 1970. Every day, if you're in the Navy, you got a tot of rum. If you're an officer, you got a full rum. If you were rating, you got a grog. And that was rum and water mixed. So it's been in the British minds connected to sailing, what, for over 100 years?
Yeah. And take into account that in the West, drinking is normalised. It's part of everyday living, you know. I mentioned earlier about going out. We're going to go out. When you say you're going to go out in the West, it means we're going to go out drinking, basically.
Yeah, usually. Maybe food, but always always alcohol attached to it.
And Kiang Wu Chu, who frequently comments, and I really like their comments because they're Malaysian. So they quite often are commenting on things that we have just recorded, and it's always interesting getting their insight.
Yeah, different perspective, it's great.
And they did say, I noticed Western people drink far more than Asians, and they do just add, this is just my observation, but I think it's true, is that it's not just sailors, it's Westerners generally.
Yeah.
Just drinking is just a normal, not every day for most people, but it's just part of our culture.
And especially when you compare it to places like Indonesia and Malaysia, because they're mostly Muslim and most Muslims don't drink. So it really stands out. Do you remember what Addy said when we were going around the island? Not Addy, what's his name, the electrician? Joe, when we were going around this island behind us, Gilly Geddy, he was talking about when he was working in a much more tourist area, about the amount of drunkenness and the, you know, the semi-nakedness and the behaviour. He was shocked, absolutely shocked. And he said, we want people to visit our island, this lovely island, but we don't want that kind of behaviour. You know, there needs to be... So you're looking at two extremely different cultures, aren't you? Yeah, very different. And not saying one is better than the other. They're just very different. And so when you get them together, they are going to clash, I think.
I have to say, actually, it's because of the culture that we're in at the moment that has made quitting drinking so much easier, because there are so many alternatives when you go into town. There are no pubs, really, in Mataram, but you've got hundreds of juice bars and coffee shops.
Great coffee.
The best coffee. Let's face it,
brilliant.
Indonesia, in my opinion, has the best coffee.
Oh, it's really good.
But the juice bars as well.
Because they've got all this fruit, haven't they?
Yeah. Yeah, it has made it a lot easier, I think.
I agree, yes, it's a delight.
Did you know that liking and subscribing on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts helps us to get noticed? Go on, give us a helping hand.
I think Alfie Vince can wrap up our podcast quite nicely with this comment, who's responding to the phrase drunken sailor. What should we do with a drunken sailor? And he says, interesting history on this phrase is that it relates to how sailors walked on land after being at sea for so long. They looked like drunken sailors, but they were just getting their land legs back, resulting in the appearance that they were drunk.
Ooh.
For those who don't know, you have a thing called sea legs after you've been on a boat for an extended period of time. Your inner ear, which controls your balance, gets used to the movement of the boat. And this means that when you walk onto land, onto hard land, this movement in your ear is still happening, which results in this swaying sensation.
Because you correct and overcorrect yourself all the
right.
time until you get used to there not being any swaying anymore. It's really...
And I notice it most when I'm sitting down on a toilet.
Yeah, that's nice for everyone to know.
On land, and I end up having to hold the sides of the walls because I'm doing this.
Yeah, or in the shower.
So maybe Alfie's comment is the answer, is that we're not drunken sailors. We're just, trying to get used to being back on land again.
I think that's a good one. So we didn't really answer the question though, did we?
What was the question?
Well, the question was, do sailors drink too much? I don't know. Have we answered the question? Is anyone any the wiser? We've had all these comments. We've been going round in circles. We talked about you giving up alcohol, which is fair enough. But I'm going to put my money where my mouth is, and I'm going to say, I think yes, they do.
I would agree. I would say yes, they drink more than the average person. And just to be a bit controversial, I think it is a problem because it is normalised and it is expected. And I think there are perhaps a few people out there who, maybe like me, need to step back and just say, do you know what? I think I'll have one less this evening. Was that a bit preachy?
No, I'll drink to that.
There we go.